All right, hello everyone. Welcome to week 6 again for the final time. Thank you so much for bearing with our technical difficulties. In the future, if we cannot resolve this issue basically by next week, I think we'll just continue with having Zoom lectures for the remainder of the semester with the option to still come in person, which we'd love to still have you. I think being able to learn in person can be really enriching if it's something that you personally really enjoy. So today we're going to be talking about FigJam and Community, and it's going to be a little bit lighter of a lecture than we normally have. We know that the midterm is currently in progress, so we don't want to overload you with a lot of really critical content that you're going to have to remember for the rest of your life. This is stuff that you'll be able to reference these slides for in the future. We want to just let you get to know FigJam and Community as two additional products to what Figma has to offer already. So going into this, we want to start with our forms. So the attendance form is at bit.ly/FD Sp22 lecture 6 and it's sent in the chat as well. It's going to be the same format every week, and they're up here on the board as well if you want to check it out. And the lecture file can also be found at bit.ly/Figma Decal-lec6 as per usual. Oh, I think somebody is unmuted, just as a heads up. Yes. All right, so with the midterm project, again, we introduced the midterm last week. Hopefully you're caught up in content and are familiar that we have a midterm project. It is due about 1 week from now. It's due end of the day on Monday next week. Unlike our normal homeworks, it's going to be due 11:59 p.m., not 5 p.m., but it is due Monday and not Tuesday. Just to kind of get a temperature check on where everyone is, could you please message in the chat, or if for you to hold your fingers up on kind of where you are in the process right now, whether you've selected a prompt and a restaurant, if you started doing some kind of brainstorming, or if you started doing your low-fi's, mid-fi's, anything above that. And just hold up a finger of where you're at. 1, 3, okay, awesome. Getting 2s, 3s in the chat too. Again, if you're at a 1, that's totally fine. We don't want this project to be you need to spend 60 hours on it. We really want it to be equivalent to basically 2 homeworks. It's going to be kind of a large homework, but we do want you to get to see all parts of the design process. If you do feel like you're not super far in right now, or if you feel like you're at a 1 right now, it is good to have something started by this Thursday, because this Thursday we're going to be having a critique during lab. So in your lab groups, you're going to get together and then share any work that you have right now and have an opportunity to get a little bit of feedback. So if you're at a point where you feel like you're stuck on something, if you just can't come up with an idea for what you want to do and you want to get some collaboration, other kind of brains in the mix, and to figure out what exactly you want to pursue, this Thursday is a great time to do so. And we do encourage everyone to show at least something, whether it's you're really far in the process and you want final feedback, or if you're just getting started. So any amount of work is totally fine to show, but make sure that you do have something prepared for this Thursday's lab to show a critique. Do you all have any questions about the midterm right now, logistically, content-wise, or anything? Cool. If you do, feel free to send them in the chat, and Jenny should address them later on as well. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into today's content, starting with FigJam. So FigJam is a secondary tool that Figma has created that's focused on brainstorming and collaboration. So you can think of FigJam as basically a whiteboard, like a physical whiteboard, the same that we normally use a chalkboard in a classroom, the same way that people who often are designers will use a physical whiteboard in order to do main brainstorming and things like that. Whiteboard tools have become a little bit more common as teams switch to being more hybrid, as teams can become, a lot of people living in different cities and different time zones working together on a single project. These online whiteboards, which started kind of like Miro and Mural, have become an important part of a designer's toolkit or designer's kind of process in any kind of digital design. So Figma has created its own tool called FigJam, cute little name, to basically work on any kind of ideation and brainstorming with your coworkers, with your friends, whoever it is that you're collaborating with at the same time. And it has the same kind of multiplayer functionalities as Figma, but it is a lot more pared down to have less tools that are only useful for kind of brainstorming. So at a first glance, the FigJam workspace is really pretty simple. It's pretty clean for the most part. There's no layers panel over here. There's no pages over here. There's no right sidebar at all telling you all the details about all of the things that you're selecting. And instead, all of the tools are housed down here in this bottom toolbar, and also in this bit of top right stuff right here. And there's a lot just like less things to have to worry about. And you might notice that the icons and kind of the visuals that they use are a lot more tactile. So instead of using a fountain pen icon to introduce, a pen, you have this like actual, almost like Apple Pencil or just like a physical pencil. Here you have these like sticky notes that feel like you can drag them out. It's made to be a lot more playful and in a way just like be exciting to use and a little bit more fun than your normal kind of design work. The top right toolbar really quickly has a couple of main things that you might already be familiar with. So audio is there, the share is the same, the icons are the same as well. Comments are going to actually live up here. If you remember in normal Figma, they're in the top left, but they'll exist here in FigJam. But there's also this collaboration tools menu that's shown by this sparkle icon. Very cute, just a couple of extra things that are not necessarily in Figma. Including, sorry, I don't know what the best place to put everyone is, including the emote and the stamp. These are really fun to play with, and I'll just like jump into a Figma file later to show you what it's like. But you can also do a cursor chat, and then you can high five each other, which is very cute. One of the last things that I think is pretty unique to FigJam that I would really encourage you to leverage is the timer, which we'll dig into a little bit later as well. And last thing here is just like the zoom settings. You can still zoom in the same way. It just gives you an easier way to click, especially if you're like on an iPad or something where that's like a little bit easier to do. The bottom toolbar is where you're going to get the bulk of your materials. You have the move and pan that are the same as the move and pan in Figma. You have a marker, which functions the exact same way as the pen tool, but it also includes a highlighter and an eraser. The shapes let you drag things out for diagramming. So if you ever had to do a flow chart or any kind of like diagram and any kind of tool like Google Slides, you'll be able to drag out shapes really easily. Sticky notes are probably the most like well-utilized tool in FigJam. It functions the same way as a physical sticky note. It has a little bit of depth to it, has a little bit of a texture to it. You can drag them out, you can layer them on top of each other, you can write your notes, you can have your name attached to them or not attached to them, and we'll dig into that in a little bit. These other things, text functions how you expect it to. Connectors are to go along with shapes as a way to like draw really clean arrows. So instead of having to like doodle these like lines all the way across your screen, the connectors are gonna give you really nice 90-degree curves whenever you need them in order to kind of direct things to each other. Stamps and emotes I mentioned earlier, and then there's also this inserts kind of box. This icon is really special. I think it's like a toolbox or like a fun like toy box. I also want to give the caveat that some of these screenshots are a little outdated because they literally released this last week. This is like kind of a new version of some of the existing features where this previously was like 5 or 6 separate icons. They just lumped them into one thing. So if you see some of the screenshots be a little bit inaccurate, it's because they were uploaded like literally a week ago, so we haven't gotten a chance to change them. But we'll be going through it in a little bit of a demo. Cool. So walking through all of these tools kind of left to right, as we've talked about. The marker tool, pretty similar to FigJam, or pretty similar to Figma's pencil tool, where you draw lines, it smooths them out into vectors in the same way. I feel like it's a little bit easier to use in FigJam because they provide you this really easy color palette. One big part of FigJam that I find really important is it strips away a lot of the complexity. So where in Figma, if you drew a line, you'd have to go back and be like, oh, I want this stroke to be 6 pixels wide. I want it to be 70% opacity, and I want it to be the hex code 2020. If you are using FigJam, you probably don't care about that. You want to get your ideas down on paper as quick as possible. And so for that reason, they've given you these default colors and default stroke sizes so that you can really easily just select them and kind of move on with what you're doing. You can't edit nodes the same way that you do it in the marker tool or the pencil tool in Figma. You can't edit vector networks in FigJam. That's a feature currently that's limited to Figma design, but you are able to adjust some other things. The tool for this is M or P or Shift P. So if you're comfortable using Figma shortcuts, it'll translate pretty easily. The shape tool makes shapes, big surprise. Again, pretty similar to Google Slides. It has most of the shapes you'd need for any kind of diagramming. I think they've also since introduced a couple more shapes that you'd use in like computer science information architecture, like cylinders and like folder icons. Once you create them, you can change the stroke, the outline, and the fill to be any kind of color from these kind of 8 colors that they have pre-selected. And then you can connect them with the connectors in a little bit. So see here, whenever you select any object in FigJam, one of the main differences is that lack of that whole right panel that shows you all the details of the color and the size. In lieu of that, we have this kind of hovering toolbar, like this like heads up display, I guess, in a way that shows up over any object you have selected. So this shows up with the color, the stroke, and the outline. So you can adjust all of these things really easily without having to move your mouse across the screen. And it's very like responsive to whatever it is that you have selected at the time. You can change a couple of key things about it, like the stroke type, whether you have it solid, dashed, or not outlined at all. And then you can change things like text. So within any of the shapes, you can go ahead and add text directly without having to drag a text box inside of it. It'll be centered and it'll collapse if it's too long for the shape itself. It has all the basic things that you'd normally find in any kind of text editing. So any kind of basic shortcuts like Command B, Command I should all work. And within them, you can include links, bullets, and like any kind of centering that you normally want. So I would really, really strongly recommend using FigJam a little bit if you ever need to make diagrams. It is going to be so much faster than if you were to make it in Figma, where you'd have to like draw out every single shape, draw out all of the arrows. FigJam makes it pretty easy to do these kinds of things. So if you're thinking about maybe like for any of the apps that you're doing right now, the user flows. So for example, if you want to go forward with creating a website, you might be thinking about, okay, if I'm on the website and I'm on the landing page, what kind of screens do I want to get to next? How do I actually get from point A to point B? Or let's say I'm talking about, I'm making a website for Yogurt Park. I want to talk about the history of it because I know that it's like well known for being really, really old. I want to talk about the flavors that are available in rotation right now, and then the flavors that they're available all the time. So I want to figure out, how do I get from point A to point B using these diagramming tools, using these shapes to represent each screen and the arrows to represent how you get from these screens is a really useful way to leverage FigJam, for example. These connectors, I should talk about this first. The connectors let you make paths or connections between shapes, objects, anything that you have on your screen, for the most part used for diagramming, like I've just said. The keyboard shortcut is X, or you can just go ahead and select it here. If you ever just need to draw an arrow, you can do it as well and use these connectors to your advantage. So if I want to easily make a connection, FigJam makes it pretty easy. So if you select any given shape, if you hover next to it in any of the 4 directions from the shape, a circle with a plus sign will automatically appear. If you click and drag out from that circle into the plus sign, you can drag directly into any object and it'll make like a really clean arrow from those 2 objects without you having to like worry about the pixel perfect stuff. It just selects that your mouse is kind of close enough and it puts it there for you. So to connect any 2 objects, you can hover to the right, left, above, or below it and connect it to anything else that you have on the screen. It's going to do like as quick of a path as possible. So it's not going to automatically like dodge anything in its path, but you can then adjust the lines to be however you want. Yeah, connectors can also be drawn from an existing shape to make a new shape. So if this is like a workflow that makes more sense to you, if you just have one shape, you can click and drag directly out to nothing, and it's going to make another shape for you identical to the last one. So you can just kind of continuously iterate on whatever you're thinking about without having to like switch tools, go from the shape to the connector to the shape to the connector. It does it all for you pretty easily. Cool. This is the adjustment stuff that I talked about earlier. This will be a little bit easier to see if I just go into a FigJam file and show y'all later. But you can make them all squiggly. They make it kind of as nice as possible of a shape so that you don't have like noodles everywhere. You can imagine like one of the benefits of having a digital tool to do whiteboarding instead of doing it on a physical whiteboard is that you can undo things. You can manipulate stuff and move them around as individual objects, where I can't draw a line on a chalkboard and then pick it up and put it somewhere else. So having it be a digital tool gives you a couple of different advantages there. These parts are going to be a little bit off because they actually exist within that like special toy box icon that I talked about before, but I'll explain any of the things that are within there. So I think for a lot of these, we'll actually just go ahead and do a demo, but one of the main interesting parts of FigJam is that they have these kind of libraries of stickers that they've already made for you. You can use like Messenger stickers or Facebook stickers or just like iMessage stickers. A lot of these exist in FigJam also that they commissioned artists to make specifically so that if you're working with someone, you can add like a cute little illustration or a cute little sticker to like react to things or to just share that you're excited about something or just make stuff a little bit more fun. You're going to see that this idea of just like making your work a little more fun is going to be a pretty common thread throughout FigJam. This came out during like the peak of COVID when people were just really miserable all the time. And I think people really wanted a tool that would be a little bit more fun to use. So a lot of it is really set on just making work a little bit more exciting. So these stickers, while they just like appear as little illustrations, they actually are all components and most of them are variants. So as you see in this kind of GIF that's happening right now, if you put down any of these stickers or components, it's going to give you an option to change the variant if it is a variant, and you're also going to see it's outlined in purple like any other component or variant is. And something to note is that you can actually copy things from Figma to FigJam and vice versa. So if you were to say like be making any set of like components in your Figma file and you wanted to bring them into FigJam, you can copy paste them and like inherit any of the properties that it would normally have in Figma design. Templates are another way to get started with FigJam. If you have no idea what you want to use it for, there's a lot of community made and official ones from Figma telling you how to do things like doing crazy eights, doing brainstorms, doing like team workshop building things. Tons of extra resources that exist right now that you can leverage in order to help you just get started with FigJam. These are also hosted within the toolbar itself in that like toy box that I mentioned earlier. Images, obviously you can also put, this is a picture of one of our past instructors' cats. You can use the image tool to also insert anything. And the same basic things apply. You can Command C, Command V images into your files. Okay, stamps and emotes. I think this is the best part of FigJam. So whenever you're working with anybody else, you can press E and it'll open this kind of ring of, I guess it's a wheel technically of different stamps that you can put down. So if you're in, say, critique this week and you're using FigJam and you're hearing about other people's ideas, if you really like something about their design, you can just put a heart sticker next to it, put a +1 sticker next to it. If you have everybody leaving notes or pieces of text everywhere and you agree with someone, you can put down your face sticker next to it. You can put a +1 next to it, just as a way to like really quickly leave a little bit of interaction and communication without having to like add a bunch of pieces of text or talk out loud. These emotes are also kind of transient. They exist on the screen for a couple of seconds and you click and hold, but then they disappear. They don't actually add anything to canvas. It's just kind of cute. So it's a nice thing to do if you're working with anybody else on the file at the same time. And to access any of these things, you press E on your keyboard, or you go to that collaboration menu in the top right that we talked about earlier. So this just the whole combination of like using stickers, using stamps, using emotes, using sticky notes, generally makes it feel like a little bit more like you're together in the same room and you're working on something at the same time. This is a screenshot of one of our old meeting notes where we were trying to figure out what time to hold our labs and what were the pros and cons of holding labs in certain ways. We just had everybody leave sticky notes with their thoughts and their ideas, and then we had people put +1 stickers next to anything that they agreed with. This made us kind of come to this conclusion within like 5 minutes. It was a very easy way to communicate with everybody without having to like pass the mic around to everyone on Zoom. Cool. I mentioned the timer earlier. The timer can be found again in that top right section under the Sparkle toolbar. This sets a native timer inside of the file that anybody who's on the file will be alerted at the same time. So if you set it and we're all on the file together, everybody's going to see it in the top right corner. It's all going to be synced together. It's going to play like a countdown at the very end to let us know that it's time to stop. This is super helpful if you're time boxing something, if you're collaborating with someone, if you wanted to say like, hey, let's brainstorm about this for 3 minutes. It's just built in as a feature that people are going to need a lot of the time, so you don't have to go separately into a website or onto your phone to set a timer. Yeah, this is like a big deal because like originally people kept making plugins or different other kind of add-ons to Figma in order to give you a way to add a timer. So Figma was like, fuck it, let's just make one. So I think this is a pretty nice lesson of just like the way that Figma will add features because they are useful to their users. Okay, high fives. This has technically no like work value. There is no real add in like making your designs better tangibly. It's literally just cute. If you're in a file with anybody else, you can hold down the H key, which is the hand tool, or just wiggle your cursor around really fast. And the hand tool will become bigger and kind of wave around and let you high five people. So if someone puts their hand next to you, you can high five them. It's like holding hands in the Google Doc, but it's cuter. Yeah, there's no real other benefit or use to this. It's literally just fun. And then last couple of things before I just go into a demo. I mentioned this earlier, but you can copy and paste items from FigJam and Figma interchangeably. So if you were to say like be working on your kind of, let's say you're doing your midterm user research right now, and you want to use FigJam to really easily put down sticky notes, kind of mind map about stuff, you can do that. And then you can copy paste everything from there into your Figma design file so you can access it without having two tabs open all the time. It's really helpful, I think, to be able to do this when you're doing stuff like diagramming or like really complex stuff that's easier to do in FigJam, but that you want to have in your file so you don't have two tabs open all the time. You might notice here there are some items that are treated differently when they're pasted into Figma design. So for example, the sticky notes have their own special icon, the connectors have their own special icon, shapes have their own special icon. They're all treated as components. You won't be able to access the main component because that's like in Figma's code, basically. You can't edit it. But it does allow you to like inherit all the properties and the traits that you normally have in FigJam. So with that said, let's go ahead and just do a little bit of a demo. This is a helpful file that you can play around with, but I don't think they've updated it since the update that came out 1 week ago. So we're gonna go ahead and just make a FigJam file and play with it on our own. So sorry, I'm just using your computer now, Nick. I hope this is okay. But yeah, we'll go ahead and just make a new FigJam file and play around with it. So if you want to, if you're like on your computer right now, just like open it up and play around with it, feel free to. So if this is your first time using FigJam, it's probably going to open up this menu asking you to pick a template. You can go ahead and select one. Any picks? Anything sound fun? Oh, these are complicated. Let's do the feelings wheel. Sound good? Okay, so we're going to add this template called the feelings wheel. As you can see, it has everything selected when I put it down. This is just something that somebody else on the internet made. They posted it to community, which we'll talk about in a minute. This is just kind of a graphic that they've created. These aren't necessarily all like inherent elements in FigJam, but this is, I guess, a way to do like a little team icebreaker where you grab people and you have them put things down. So basic components of FigJam, pieces of text. You have these text sizes that come from small, medium, large, extra large, huge. And also recently they added tiny and ginormous because they're just quirky and fun like that. All of these pieces of text, you can do bolding on them. You can change the color of them. Anything that you normally be able to do with text, you can do here. Same way that you normally be able to do it. These are all small shapes. Oh, shoot. These are all circles, I think, that they've made very, very small. But if I were to add my own shapes, I could drag this out from here. As you can see, just this like little interaction of kind of being dragged in and out. I can add any pieces of text that I want here. And then thinking about those connectors that we talked about earlier, when I'm hovering around it, it's going to show these little circles. If I hover directly on it, it'll tell me where it's going to appear if I click on it. So if I want, let's say number 1, and I want number 2 to be below it, I can click this, drag it out to wherever I want it to be, and say number 2. And then if I continue doing this, I can have them go wherever I want. Number 3, let's say that I actually want to go back over here and I want this to not collide. So I can take this, and if you click on any connector, it's kind of tricky to click on them sometimes, so you just click and drag. These little handles up here that let me do this, I can kind of adjust the way that I have these stepped, and I can start texting in these as well. Cool. So that's connectors. Any other way that you want to connect things as well, you can have more than one connector come out of one particular shape. You can have them go everywhere, wherever you want. You can connect them to things that aren't shapes either. So if I had a piece of text, a sticky note right here, I'm getting really tripped up that you don't have an escape key on your keyboard. And then you can connect stuff to the sticky note as well in order to move things around. Sorry, I'm not used to using a Mac. I'm using a Mac right now. I'm using this computer. Yeah, things I talked about earlier as well, the stamps and the emotes. If I press E, it's going to bring up this little wheel. All the stamps I can click on and put down. They've actually added a lot of quality of life updates recently where like stamps are going to stick to the objects that you put them on right now. If I click on an emote, I can wave to somebody if they're also on the file. I can laugh, cry at someone. I don't really know when this is appropriate in a work meeting, but I guess you can. And then they can also do cursor chat like you normally be able to do in Figma design as well. This is that kind of fun box that I talked about earlier that wasn't reflected in most of our slides. If you hover over it, it shows all these objects coming out and it does widgets, stickers, templates, and more. Widgets are also not part of this lecture because they came out halfway through the semester last semester, but they are something that is unique to Figma. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but when we talk about plugins next week, but you can see that the stickers exist here. I can drag out these stars and I see that they're outlined in purple as a way to let me know that they are a component. If I went to here and stickers and I clicked on other things. Also, caveat that I think this feature is a little bit broken right now. A lot of these things aren't loading. It's just a bug on Figma's end. But for the most part, it still works. Some of these you can tell that they are components as well because they have editable components. So I can edit the text here within the sticker that I put down, and you can even see that it shapes to fit the amount of text that I put down. One day I'll write filler text. It's not key smashing, but that's not today. And I can kind of adjust these stickers as I want to. Going past the stickers section, there's another part of it that says templates. So I put down the feelings wheel earlier. I can put down any of these other objects. And then widgets and plugins we'll talk about later on. But widgets you can think of as like basically little toys that you can add into your FigJam files. So one of them is this photo booth. You can literally just take a picture of yourself. I don't know if this will work because I have my webcam on right now also. Oh, great, it works. I can actually just take a picture of myself within FigJam, and then it's going to print out the picture and let me put it in my file. So very cute stuff. There's a lot of really interesting use cases for widgets, and people have built out a lot of really cool things that you can play with. But we'll dive into that more in a later week. Plugins are a little bit of a different thing. If you use like a Chrome extension, you can think of a plugin as a Chrome extension, but for Figma, it adds some kind of additional ability, additional feature that you wouldn't normally have. One of the most common ones that people use is spell, because it's a spell check feature. Figma does not have a spell check feature, so somebody went out, built it, and made it in a way that they could add it on to Figma as a plugin. So you can go ahead and use these as well. And then finally, a couple of other things. If you like coding, you can add code blocks. So they're really nice. You can have images uploaded. I'm not going to import Nick's images. I'm not that mean. And then you can add embeds or links. So if I wanted to embed like a Spotify link, I don't have one memorized, but I just wanted to do youtube.com. I can go ahead and add something like that. But I guess it won't work if I don't have a normal link. This is going to basically make a nice embed that you normally see on, like, if you've ever like sent a link into Slack, for example, it formats it really nicely, a little bit of a thumbnail, lets you interact with it sometimes. If it's like a Spotify playlist, for example, you can have that within your FigJam file as well. Cool. Any questions about FigJam? I know that just threw a lot of information at you. I do think the best way to learn it is just to play around with it a lot and kind of get used to it. Are there any questions right now? Right, I think we'll go ahead and take our break for now. There's a couple of things we'll talk about later on with community. Actually, I'll talk about one more thing before our break. So we started a little bit late today. Apologies for going back on that. But we'll talk about some more FigJam use cases. I've already touched on a lot of these things, but we'll connect them to templates. So if you ever want to do one of these things, a template out there exists for you to go ahead and try it. We talked about this before and we just saw it show up. If you closed that and you want to go back to it, you can actually also just go here. There should be a template section and you should be able to add anything like this empathy map. I can just go ahead and add it right now. So if you close it, don't worry, you can always access it again. So if you're feeling stuck, these are helpful use cases. So diagramming, one of the key functions in FigJam. If you don't know how to make it look, this template just gives you an example of a pretty complicated diagram. So you get an idea of like, oh, this is how I'm going to use this kind of shape. This is when I use this kind of connector. Are any of you new in like EE16A or B? If you are, I know there are people at other universities who've done circuit diagramming in FigJam. You can do that if you like circuits a lot. But diagramming you can basically use for anything that you want. And this is a template that helps you kind of get comfortable with it. And it does important things like show you all the shortcuts that you might need. User personas are something that we're also hoping that you kind of like learn how to do as you do these midterm and final projects. User personas are basically identifying what a user might look like in any kind of project. Like for example, with your midterm right now, identifying who a patron of the restaurant that you're talking about is, or maybe who an employee of the restaurant is. This doesn't mean necessarily taking somebody, interviewing them and putting all their personal details out there on blast. It means understanding what a generic user or what the average user might look like. So if I've talked to 16 people, and they all really like to go to Yogurt Park, I can identify things that they have in common, like maybe they're all college students, maybe they all have classes that end on Southside later at night, so they go to Yopo really often for that reason. Maybe they carry cash on them a lot, so they like to go to Yopo because because it's cheaper if it's cash. I can try to identify these like key characteristics that make them a good user or a common user, and lay them down in this like featured or format that they have in FigJam here. Some kind of image, some kind of basic information about their age, occupation, location, a little bit of a biography to give them more substance. And then I can give them personality traits as a way to kind of quantify as best I can information that is generally pretty subjective. So creating a user persona can be something that you do for your midterm project or just for any other kind of UI UX project in the future to better understand and empathize with the users that you're creating with. Fun stuff that we saw earlier, like with the emotions wheel. Sometimes people just make stuff that's cute. There's a haiku composer that operates a lot like fridge magnets might. So feel free to play around with those and check them out to see what you can do with this kind of whiteboarding tool. And then finally, use it as just a generic whiteboard. So while Figma can be used to make like really complicated stuff, you can do whatever you want. Figma is great for making memes, for example. I make all my memes in Figma. You can do whatever you want in FigJam. I think it's a really good way to run meetings, for example. If you're tired of using Google Docs or if you normally use Notion, I think FigJam is like a more fun way to leave your notes down because it gives you kind of a two-dimensional map or like a basically infinite canvas to have people interact in. So we've run all of our Figma Decal meetings in FigJam since it came out. So we have these sections. So we don't organize what we're talking about. And then we have our icebreakers where we'll kind of put down sticky notes and you draw lines between people to indicate who's talking next. So I think it's a good way to introduce a little bit more like fun, sparkle, something that's like a little bit more engaging into your general work streams. And also it's just like a pretty handy tactile way to design where a lot of design tools don't feel like they translate to physical things really easily. I think FigJam does a good job of it. So cool, we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of a break right now until 6:57, so about 3 or 4 minutes. And then we'll come back and talk about Figma Community, which one of our past team members actually worked on, the intern at Figma. Let's take a couple minutes. You're on this fine. Cool. So the last thing we're going to talk about today really quickly is Figma Community. So Figma Community is another tool in Figma that you actually already been using. So anytime that you've copied any of the homework files, you've been going to Figma Community. Anytime you open the slide deck link that we send out as a bit.ly every week, you're going to Figma Community. So kind of zooming out and understanding what this is, it's basically a space for all users to discover resources, find inspiration, and support creators. You can kind of think of it as like Figma's built-in community space, social media platform, portfolio space, whatever you want to think of it as. So Figma's main goal has been to make design more accessible to everyone. So community is a pretty significant part of that vision. And the idea is to allow people to share all of these files, all these resources, all these templates, all these tools that they make generally for free and open source, where you can not only use the files and view them, you can dive into them, make copies of them, understand exactly how they put things together. And it's a really great learning resource. So user can contribute by publishing files or developing plugins, or with FigJam developing widgets, which are a little bit different from plugins in a way that they're a little bit more tangible. So if you are familiar with anything like Behance, Dribbble, even Instagram, you can think of it like that, but just directly within Figma. So within the Figma community, you can find a couple of different types of resources. The first are files, the most common type of resource. These are available for anybody to view, inspect, and duplicate. So again, with the homeworks you've been doing, you duplicate each of the files and then interact with them, these copies that you've made. Anything that you change does not actually change the original file. It only affects your own copy of it. Plugins are what I mentioned earlier. You can think of them like Chrome extensions or Safari extensions. They're third-party add-on features. For the most part, they add some kind of feature or some kind of ability that you didn't have before. So when you install a plugin, instead of duplicating it, you install it. You can access it directly within the editor and FigJam. We're going to talk about plugins at a lot more length and give you like a long list of helpful plugins next week. But for this week, just kind of understand that this is something that is available to you. And if you're interested, you can go ahead and look for things. This is a great place to be like, oh, wow, I wish Figma had XYZ feature. Like, for example, if you use Adobe Illustrator, you might be hurting for like the ability to arc text. There is a plugin called Arc that lets you arc text in Figma. The last type is prototypes, which are what you're looking at right now. Anytime we share the lecture link, for example, those are always prototypes. If we go to Figma, actually we go to bit.ly/Figma Decal like 6. So all of these that we share with you are set to be prototypes, which means that when you click on it, you can go through all of the slides really easily, as opposed to having to like open up the file itself. With these, you can click on them and you can actually enlarge the whole screen, whatever you need to. If this were to be a file, for example, you could do something else. With a prototype, if you click into it, you can interact with it by using the arrows, or if this were a, say, prototype of an app, you could go ahead and just interact with it how you'd interact with an app. Going back into here and talking about a file, for example, we can look at last week's lab. We're actually looked at the parental practice lab. If you see this, if you've ever interacted with it, you can scroll around and you can use the whole thing like you would if it's an actual file. So I'll go ahead and enlarge this, and then I'll go down here to open up the page. So if I want to go to, sorry, I might have actually clicked ask to unmute on somebody. I did not mean to. I can go to the lab activity and I can just actually go around with this and I can zoom into it. I can't edit anything, but I can view it and interact with it in this way to get a sense of what their file is before I even decide to duplicate it. And then if I'm at this point and I'm like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. I can click on this and I'll make a copy of the file in my own kind of drafts. You can find community, the whole workspace in the right-hand panel of Figma, or you can go to figma.com/community. If you're working within the desktop app, it's going to exist right here. So whenever we send you these direct links, we're sending you directly to a particular resource in a particular file. It's like I sent you to like a specific Twitter post instead of just twitter.com. But if I want to access the whole community and explore it, you can go here right above where your own like files are in the left-hand side, or again, figma.com/community. So I'll go ahead and just open up figma.com/community. And it's going to let me see all of these different things. So up at the top, you can already see that there's all these different filters I can look by. So if I'm trying to, start wireframing for my project, I can go ahead and click this. It's going to show me a lot of wireframe kits. If I want to do illustrations, I can click on this and view a lot of these like modular illustrations that people have created, or anything else that you want to see. If you want to look for a creator, like I'll just look for myself, I guess. You can type something in. And then this is going to show me any of the files that are related to the word ACE, any of the plugins related to the word ACE, and then any creators, including me right up there. And you can access any of those things. You can go back to the home screen here. You can scroll down all these things. One of the nice things about Figma as well is they are pretty consistently adding new plugins here, adding new like things that are trending or things that are popular and useful to other designers. So these are not things that I would necessarily like, I know all of them because some of these might have been posted like yesterday or a week ago. So this, for example, is a plugin that helps you make better thumbnails for your files. If you've ever been using Figma, you just get really lost in a sea of like gray backgrounds and all these like thumbnails that don't make a lot of sense. Somebody has now made a plugin to help you create better file thumbnails and make a little bit more sense. This is what I just talked about. These filters help you look for different things. You can search for anything you want here. These are always going to be featured. So when the screenshot was taken, it was in around August and September. So Figma was featuring these like back to school resources that were more helpful at the time. You can look at top plugins and trending files, and you can sort your feed as well by whatever is relevant to you. Each of the resources looks like this as well. So if we were to open up, say, like the homework files, I always show this here where you can duplicate it in order to have your own copy. You can like the file if you've enjoyed using it. And then down here, all the descriptions and the information about this. This can range from one sentence to nothing to a really, really, really detailed change log of every single update they've ever made to the file. It's pretty variable, but any information is going to be here. Anything else this creator has made or remixes of the file exists here. And then comments are down at the bottom. So comments are a way to engage with any other creators. You can treat them the same way you treat any other comments on any other platform. So if you comment, the creator will be notified and they can hopefully respond or reply to any of your comments to help give feedback. There's also on this right side, you can go to the profile of whoever made that particular resource. So if I go back to, sorry, I'm just using this community, I can see this was created by the pencil.co and Arsen Koliba. So I can click on either of these and then access their own homepage that shows any other thing that they have created that I can then decide to download as well. These creator profiles, nice segue, are a way that you can opt into having your own profile or account on Figma. So you've already had a Figma account for a while. You might not have a community account yet, this is a great time to go reserve these handles. I think they've now gotten to the point because it's out of beta that there's not as many unique handles. I managed to get ace, which is probably my biggest flex. But if you want to publish or like or follow or comment on anything, you do need a handle so that you can basically exist on the entity as some kind of person. Duplicating and installing, as you already know, don't require a public profile, but we highly encourage you to do this. This midterm project and the final project we have later on are a really good opportunity to start putting yourself out there and posting work and kind of building your own sort of portfolio within Figma itself. It's really handy to be able to share all of the work you've done in Figma by just sending them a link to like figma.com/ace or figma.com/your name, and has everything that you've ever built that you want to actually share with people. So now that you kind of know what it is, you know that you've already been using it for homeworks, what else can you actually use Community for? So mainly, we would encourage that you look at it for inspiration, both on an aesthetic level, but also on the way that people organize their files. One of the best things about Community is that you can dig in there and really get super, super detailed on how does this person name everything in their file? How does this person name their pages to kind of organize them in a way that makes sense? How does this person use components and variants in a way that maybe I've never thought of? How does this person use auto layout, which is something we'll be talking about next week? So using all these resources and all these files as a way to learn design is really, really important. So something I talked about before was like the material design kit. So in the components lecture, I opened up this file, the material design, I think UI here. This exists and it is a great resource. This is actually like hosted by Material Design by Google. So they released all of these like actual components that they're actually using in their tools right now, in their products right now. So you can see like if you have an Android phone, how do they actually make all of these different things? How do they design all these different things? You can download this file and see exactly what it is they're doing. And then like I mentioned earlier, they have a really detailed change log that tells you everything that they've changed since they've opened it. This actually is deprecated, so you can actually go to this new file that has even more detailed information, is even more up to date. Yeah. You can also use it as a way to workflow. So we mentioned plugins earlier. Again, we're going to talk about this in more depth next week. But plugins like Better Font Picker, Contrast Checker are going to be ways to just help you speed up and work faster. It's always work smarter, not harder. Templates are also a great way to use FigJam in order to set up meetings, get things started. Because a lot of the time, opening a blank file and being like, well, it's time for me to do XYZ can be really daunting. So having templates is a really great way to basically make it a little bit less scary to get started on any kind of project. And then finally, you can look at design libraries, UI kits, stuff that I just talked about to help you either get inspired or just go ahead and start using them so you don't have to worry about like the nitty-gritty when you're coming up with your ideas. Cool. We've already done a little bit of a demo with Figma Community and kind of walking through it, but I wanted to give you an update that in the future, we're going to talk a little bit about publishing and remixing, plugins and widgets. This isn't actually accurate anymore, but last semester, Jago, who made some of these slides, actually worked at Figma over the summer, and he was an intern on the community team. So he talked a little bit about that experience as well. Cool. Any questions about Figma Community? Cool. All right, so we're going to look at a couple of examples really quickly. We're not going to click through all of these, but if you are interested, they all exist within this file. So if you go ahead and download it or duplicate it, you'll be able to access all of these. So the first one is this brand style guide kit. So if you are personally interested in branding, this is a really great way to start understanding how to put together branding. So in week 2, we did assign you to find a company or find some kind of organization and dig into their branding. You might have come across something that looks a little bit like this, either on their website or something else. But this is an example of how to put together a brand style guide kit. So you can see that they have these layouts that are almost like a slide deck or almost like a PowerPoint. And you have all of these different templates basically as a way to understand, how do I lay out this information? What information do I need, first of all? And how do I put it in a way that makes sense to anybody that's viewing it? So in this case, I don't actually know anything about the people who made this. I don't know what this brand is. Obviously, this is like a hypothetical brand, but they've put a lot of really clear examples to help me understand, if I was making, let's say, a brand guideline set for Figma Decal, which we do have a whole brand style guide. How might I put it together? How might I figure out what information is important? What do I need to know? One of the interesting things that I think is really fun about brand style guides is they tell you what to not do. So you can make all these fun little graphics about like, do not turn the Facebook logo upside down. Do not make the Amazon logo backwards. I think this is very silly. But there's all these like different things that you can consider if you were to ever do your own branding work. So that's one really helpful file. If you're interested in that, if you do not care about branding, you're more interested in graphic design, you can look at all of the examples of really, really cool graphic design on Figma Community. This is somebody who just made these posters that use the font Enter. I really, really think some of these graphics are really cool. Like these are all made entirely in Figma, so it's really pretty gradient kind of squiggle. If I'm curious about like how the crap did you do that, I can duplicate the file. I can click on the squiggle and see how they use these gradient layers on it in order to make it make sense. I can also see like if they downloaded a plugin to do this, or if they made this actually several multiple shapes, if they use masking in some way. So I can dig into this file and learn about how they did everything that they did. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool other pieces of graphic design that you can find on here. People do a lot of these things with gradients that are basically like, how extreme can we take Figma to make it look like you didn't make this in Figma? Because it's not something that you would think of that you make in like a UI UX tool, but it's all done in here. This avatar illustration system was really like huge when it came out. It's still popular. It has like 45,000 downloads. I think it's one of the most popular files on Figma Community because it utilized Figma in a pretty creative way to do these modular illustrations, which is now something that is really, really common. So if you've ever seen like Picru, or we talked about like Nintendo Mii's before, this is a similar idea where you could grab any kind of face with a base and use the colors the way that you want. And then they made all of these different assets that you could layer on top like a sticker sheet, the way that you'd make like a dress up doll, or the way that you dress up like yourself in the morning. So all of these kind of faces, all these kind of eyebrows, noses, glasses were put together in this kind of design system, you could call it, to make your own avatars. And people have since made other similar things. A lot of people have done this for their final projects or the midterm projects. There's a lot of NFT stuff in here now. I don't like that. But going into just like this idea of how to make illustrations and how to make things modular, this is a great place to look for it. Community has a lot of really, really wonderful illustrations that are super, super impressive. If you like illustration, we're going to talk about this in much more detail in 3 weeks in lecture 9. It's one of my favorite lectures. We're going to talk about all these different things that you can do to make your illustrations look even better. This is also really helpful resource here. These kind of studio mockups are something that a lot of people will do in Photoshop, or people will do this in Illustrator. What this person has basically done is made these this plugin that has all these default shapes, like a perfume bottle or a phone or a cup, and it's going to take any image that you put into it and warp it in a way that is appropriate to like make it look like it physically exists. So if you've ever seen those like billboard mockups or phone mockups, those people do not actually like painstakingly edit their stuff. They usually put them into some kind of plugin or some kind of builder that'll do it for them. So this is a great way to do mockups if you ever need to do a mockup of like, say I'm making like a hot sauce brand and I don't want to have to like Photoshop my drawing onto a hot sauce bottle. I can probably find something that will do it for me. This I talked about earlier, material design system plus the icons. Super helpful and a really, really great resource if you're interested in UI UX, understanding how a design system works, understanding how these like huge libraries are built and organized is really important. If you can go into this and understand how they put it together, then they have succeeded in making something that is navigable and easy to understand. And then a couple of other FigJam files that are helpful. The Figma for Education account posts a ton of these. They make so many different kinds of templates. It can be a little overwhelming, honestly, to look at them. But if you ever want to do anything in FigJam, literally ever, or anything in Figma, literally ever, they have probably already made something for it. So you can go ahead and take a look at these and see if there's anything that strikes your fancy. Last thing we're going to talk about is somebody made Settlers of Catan in Figma. You can play the entire game of Settlers of Catan within one Figma file with your friends. So if you are online and you don't want to go to a website and you are all a bunch of freaking nerds, you can use Figma instead and play the entire game within here. Cool. There's more stuff that's really cool. People have made like playable games. People made The Legend of Zelda, a resume template that I personally have used and think is a pretty good resource. And then even something that one of our good friends made, Tetris. You can play Tetris in Figma. there's literally nothing you can't do in Figma at this point. People have made, full games inside of it. So I would regularly recommend that you go through the community and check out what people have made. Any questions about any of these files? I'm happy to dive into them. Cool. We will go ahead and go to the last part of today, which is just basically a really quick 2 cents from us on mood boarding and finding inspiration. So as you kind of go into these midterms, I know a lot of you have probably already started this process. And if you have found like the restaurant that you want to talk about, maybe you're thinking about like, how do I go into this redesigning branding process? Or how do I go into like making their website actually look like it represents the restaurant? Finding inspiration and like understanding all these different things that other people have done and transferring it into what you can personally do is really important. And I think a really great way to start these projects. So if you're starting like a brand new design project, again, can be super overwhelming, especially if you aren't doing something with a prompt, if you've come up with your own idea, or if you're just like not talking about this midterm and you're talking about any personal design project. It's hard to start, but once you get over that initial hurdle and kind of get things rolling, it can be a lot easier to continue. So some ways to spark your inspiration are to go through online resources like Figma Community that we just talked about. Think about unexpected sources of inspiration, as you go about your day. What do you find engaging? What do you find interesting? We talked about from the very first lecture how everything in your life is designed in some way. So if you're working on like an app, you can think about anything that you do during the day. If you're making something with food, think about the food that you're eating. How is that designed by somebody? How are my cutlery designed by someone? How are my plates designed by someone? Those are all ways that you can find unexpected inspiration. And then finally, once you have like all these streams of input, you're constantly consuming media, you're constantly having like things told to you. How do you organize that and lay it out in a way that you can make it make sense to you? So some great examples of stuff that you can use to find inspiration. First, obviously Figma Community, but just generally looking at other designers' work can be a great way to start. This is not cheating. It is not a bad thing to look at work that other people have made. If you look at like the old masters who painted, they all looked at each other, they all practiced with each other, and they all like looked up to other artists as a way to learn. That is a totally valid thing to do. Honestly, the number one design tip I can give you is to steal smartly, not in a way that means taking credit for other people's work, but taking parts of their work that you really admire, looking at it and thinking, why do I admire it? What about it was helpful? And how the crap did they do that? So copying, tracing, trying to remake things that you already like is a great way to just get those tangible skills in, and then also help you get your creative juices flowing. So with that tangent, Dribble is something that people cite a lot. I personally have a lot of reservations about Dribble. I don't think it's a great way to actually display design practice or design skill, but it's very pretty. It's one way that you can get a little bit of inspiration in order to think about, what are good color palettes, what's trending right now, what's popular right now. Dribble is going to show you that. Save It is a good website for creating mood boards, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's like if you had a physical board up and you put all these pictures that represented the feeling that you're going for. So more than going for like a tangible final solution, a mood board is created to give you a sense of what you want to make and the feelings that you're trying to evoke given the word mood. Pinterest is helpful for any kind of inspiration. Musely is a Chrome extension that I think posts like daily things, or it's like your new tab on Chrome that'll just show you things that they find engaging at the moment. And then Motionographer is great for motion design inspiration. I personally also use Instagram and Twitter as great ways to just find design resources. I follow a lot of artists that I really like, and so I'll bookmark their work anytime I find it engaging. And then like I talked about earlier, you can think about things that are not necessarily super conventional. Packaging design is one of my favorite things to look at. It is everywhere. It is the easiest thing to find. If you're not inspired at the moment, go to Berkeley Bowl, go to the grocery store. There's tons of like insane amounts of marketing and like product placement and advertising that goes into all of these ads and these products that we purchase all the time. So looking at packaging is a great way to learn a little bit about design inspiration. Fashion goes for the same as well. Even if you're not super interested in like high fashion, thinking about just like the way that other people dress, why do they put certain colors together? Why do people wear grout fits when they're tired instead of wearing like bright and colorful clothes? A lot of things that go into the idea around how we present ourselves can be really helpful in empathy and understanding, the process that goes behind making a decision. Architecture, also another great example. We are really close to Worcester Hall right now, which people cite as being the ugliest building on campus after Evans, but Worcester Hall was designed for a particular reason. You can think about, maybe the reason why they designed it was so that I think the story that I've heard is that the architecture students didn't make everything look like the building that they have all their classes in. If Worcester was a beautiful, very, very gorgeous, very, very ornate building, it'd be more likely that all the students would design things that look like Worcester instead of shitting on it all the time. And so thinking about architecture, maybe even the way that like your room is laid out. What problems do you have with your own home right now? What are the pain points of getting around your house? These are great ways to think about ways to start solving the problems that you have in mind. And like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of stealing is okay, and inspiration is not the same as copying. These are the kind of the 3 golden rules that we want you to live by anytime that you think about, how much copying is too much copying, or how far can I go before it's plagiarism? The number one thing is to never take credit for something that was not your idea. So always credit any kind of inspiration that you have, especially if you are going anywhere near monetizing it. If you are selling it in any way, make sure that you clear it with anybody who inspired you. Do not sell copies of things that you do not own. Creative Commons and intellectual property is not something that we'll dive like really deeply into, but if you ever are interested in monetizing your work, I would recommend that you look into that and get an understanding of like how copyright laws work. But basically, if you're using any piece of someone else's work, make sure they're okay with it. And if you're publicly sharing it, make sure that they give credit. Another way to kind of circumvent this idea of like, how much of my copying is too much is combining multiple sources of inspiration. So if I really like X, Y, and Z, if I were to just remake X, remake Y, and remake Z, I would be copying them. But if I take X, Y, and Z, and I blend them into one thing that's new, if I blend them into like a whole new idea that is mine, that's not necessarily copying, it's taking inspiration. One of my favorite things to say is that most old art is just Bible fan art. Like a lot of people are inspired by media that already exists. A lot of people are inspired by ideas that are going to outlive us and have existed long before us. That's okay. People like to say there's nothing new under the sun, which I don't think is necessarily true. But as long as you're making sure to add your own twist, add your own style, add your own flair, add something instead of just combining things, then you're gonna be good to go. So talking about organizing inspiration, FigJam is a great way to do that. Figma is a great way to do that. It's a whiteboard. It's a tool that lets you put down images and organize them in a way that makes sense to you. So I do a lot of bookmarking, but often it can be really difficult to combine things I see at different points of the day or different points of the week into one cohesive idea. So I'd really recommend actually mood boarding and grabbing all these images or all these kind of moments that you find engaging and putting them in the same place so that your eyes can just see all of them at the same time. So I recommend, adding it to a photo album, making something in Figma, making something in FigJam, or just having like a folder on your computer that you can see everything really quickly and easily. Cool. So some more tips if you want to pursue mood boarding on your own. Be clear about your goal. So identify, if you're doing a rebrand project for the midterm, my goal is to create a brand that is friendly and represents this restaurant very accurately. Start with some keywords. This is a mood board, so it's about evoking emotion. It's about evoking a general idea. Identify that idea before you start finding images for it. And then if you have identified that idea and you've started finding things, but you start to get new ideas in the process, embrace that. There's a reason why that's happened. And it's okay to change as long as you are guided by something as you go. Any questions about mood boarding, inspiration, other resources that you want to drop that you think are helpful? Do you have anything to add? All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for today. There's again no homework this week. Just continue to work on your midterm. Again, it is due this coming Monday at 11:59 p.m. Please use your time wisely. If you haven't gotten started, please do start something before lab this week, so you can have something to share during critique. Again, we're going to be doing critique on FigJam this week, so we get a chance to practice with it. Please do not miss this lab. This is not an easy one to make up because we want to have critique. If you know you have to miss it, please let your TA know immediately and try to come to office hours on either Friday or Monday. The secret word for today is the word peach, P-E-A-C-H. P-E-A-C-H. Okay, great. Thank you, Jenny. For no particular reason, I guess FigJam is fruit related, so that's the word for today. Thank you so much. Again, there is no homework, work on your midterms, and then also we really encourage you to come to office hours if you have any questions about the project. Monday is kind of your last chance before submitting it, so do let us know. Thank you so much. We will see you next week, probably on Zoom again, and have a great week. Good luck with your midterms. Where did it go? Oh, it didn't start. Thank you. Bye.